So, a theme I'm keen to explore today is the power and the value of community, particularly today, where in so many ways we're getting much more disconnected in person, and yet we're hyper connected virtually and online. How do we get the best of both worlds? And is this possible? And joining me to dig into this a bit deeper is Rohan Bilimoria. Rohan is an international lawyer whose career has spanned the globe with some of the world's largest law firms, the world's biggest FTSE 500 companies. He's worked across London, New Delhi, Singapore, Moscow, Tokyo, and Sydney, Australia, where I think he's joining me from today. And Rohan is the founder of a global community for lawyers called Law Ninjas. And Law Ninjas started out as a WhatsApp group back in 2017 with 10 in-house lawyers. And today it has transformed into a community for thousands of lawyers and law students all across the globe. Law Ninjas has conducted free workshops for over 60 law schools. It's received Business World's Legal Entrepreneur of the Year award. They've launched a new platform, lawninjas.co, and they've hosted so far 9 general counsel summits, also across the world in person in India, Australia, South Africa, and the UK. And it's continuing to grow at an exponential rate. And alongside leading Law Ninjas, Rohan also leads global community development at an innovative law firm founded in Australia and now with offices overseas, also Law Squared. Rohan, welcome to Unbiased.
Thank you so much for that really warm introduction, Darshi. I'm really, really excited about our session today.
Thanks, Rohan. Look, just from that bio alone, growing a community virtually and globally from 10 to thousands, we have so much that we can learn from you today. And I'm someone that really does believe in the power of community, but can often find myself a bit torn where we are so stretched in our day-to-day lives. It's high pressure, it's fast paced. There is a need for it. And I'm someone that's, moved overseas several times. And I think community can be the foundation of feeling belonging. But sometimes it can feel transactional, or it can just be another thing to add to what we should be doing in order to have this well-rounded experience in our day-to-day lives. So share with me more about Law Ninjas. How did it start out, and why did you set it up originally back in 2017? And what were some of the pivotal moments that have led to its growth on such a massive scale?
So yeah, as Darshi mentioned, I've been a lawyer all my life, worked in private practice for a very long time, and then moved in-house for the first time in 2017. So my first in-house role, I think the first couple of months I was struggling quite a bit, because for anyone who's made that move, you'll know that life's quite different on either side of that fence. And so I was, having a tough time. And so I set up a small WhatsApp group and I named it Law Ninjas because I thought the name sounded cool. And I added 10 of my friends who were in-house lawyers to that group. And the idea behind it was actually so that I could have a sounding board, or, so I could ask them questions about labor laws and franchising laws and all these things you're meant to know as an in-house lawyer. But I had no clue, given that my background was all finance and project finance, working at law firms. And so, it just kind of grew from there. And I think, the key foundation for any community, regardless of whether you're a legal one or, anything else, is a common pain point or a common goal. So in this case, I think the common pain point that we all shared as in-house lawyers was that a lot of us, if not all of us, felt alone to a certain extent. I think at law firms, lawyers usually, we are surrounded by other lawyers. And so we have other people to ask questions to and bounce ideas off. Whereas when you move in-house to a company, you may be part of a legal team, but still it can feel quite alone, because a lot of your other stakeholders, your finance lead, your marketing lead, they're not lawyers. And so they can't speak the same language and understand the same pain points that you have to go through. And so I think a lot of us in this little Law Ninjas WhatsApp group, we felt alone. We felt like we were all going through similar struggles. And so being able to share that with others who were on a similar wavelength, similar backgrounds, was really powerful. And that's why it kind of grew. People started telling their friends about the group, and we started, adding and growing. And yeah, so now fast forward to 2024, we're a community, as you said, which is slightly larger with, general counsel, so legal heads. We've got in-house lawyers, we've got private practice lawyers, and it's been quite organic. We haven't, purchased any other communities or networks out there. It's all been very organic, and it's been really exciting to see.
And is that same ethos of helping each other out and being around in a sounding board where you're maybe feeling quite alone in your sphere, is that still true today, or how has it kind of evolved? And how much more have you learned about the needs of those demographics to grow that sense of community?
I think in the last 7 years, certain things have stayed the same. So, for example, everybody still feels alone. There's still similar pain points. There's still similar issues, and similar challenges. All the same stuff is there. A lot of
Yeah.
people use the group to kind of exchange ideas, ask questions, buy and sell Taylor Swift tickets. Like, all kinds of stuff happens on these groups. But most of all, I think a lot of us use it as a form of therapy, or as a form of, being able to vent to somebody else who can understand us. If a lawyer is going through a tough time, a psychologist is good in a certain sense, but they're not going to really understand what we're going through. Neither is our, family, neither is our, CEO. Who's going to understand is other people who are going through similar stuff and who come from similar backgrounds. So I think that's really powerful. But yeah, in terms of the group itself, we were a WhatsApp group, and that was great in the beginning. Then COVID happened, and COVID, I think, opened our eyes to the fact that, webinars and Zoom calls and all these things were happening, in different ways all around the world. And, even offices, all of our workplaces, adopted Microsoft Teams or Google Meet. And so it became quite okay to do these kind of online things. And so we started doing a lot more online workshops. And then COVID thankfully calmed down a couple of years ago. And the feedback then was, hey, actually, we're sick of Zoom calls and webinars. Can we actually meet each other in person? And so then we started doing these sort of smaller scale events, like little drinks, little trivia night, little things here and there. And then I said, look, let's try a conference, because I think, I've been to conferences, I've been to a lot of legal conferences, and I felt like we could do something different, something, a bit more, I guess, fun. And so now, yeah, like you said, we've done 9 of these sort of general counsel summits, and that's helped the community grow as well. And so I guess it's evolved a lot over the last 7 years. A lot of failures, a lot of pivots. And I'm actually quite excited about the next 12 months, because our strategy is just currently being developed by the team. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see what the next 12 months have in store for us. So watch the space.
It just sounds so immense for someone that's that I believe runs a pretty lean team in putting everything together. And there's a few questions that spring out of just what you've shared. And we'll take one avenue at a time. I mean, firstly, this kind of how have you found bringing together and integrating online and in person? And as you said, people post COVID, as has been my experience, post COVID, I've really seen that sense that we just were done with another virtual meeting. I want to do stuff in person. But on the other hand, we love the benefits of this kind of global workplace and a global community where you can tap in to people and their experiences all across the world and find commonalities. Certainly, as a fellow lawyer, I can totally attest to that. We just feel like no one else understands us like another lawyer, particularly in a professional context. So how have you managed to keep that balance of providing the in-person plus virtual, and what do you think the learnings could be from that we could use when we're talking to, bosses that are trying to get everyone back into the office, because it seems like it could be a really good allegory for hybrid working as well that could work.
Yeah, I think that's a big question. See, what I always say to people is there are three reasons why people attend conferences and in-person events. One is the actual content and the know-how and the intel sharing, which I think is super important. The second is the actual networking. And when I say networking, I mean relationship building. I mean, meeting each other, shaking hands, speaking to somebody over a drink or a coffee or a meal. I think that's super powerful. And the third is people come to conferences for the free food and drinks and the freebies as well, which is also equally important. I think virtual stuff that, at least I've done in the past, it kind of, yes, it ticks the first box, the content sharing. Relationship building, not that much. And then, yeah, you don't get any food at the virtual event. So both the sort of formats have their own pros and cons. I think if
Yeah.
you speak to like the GCs or the in-house lawyers, and also you speak to sponsors like law firms, legal tech companies, legal recruitment firms, they all prefer the in-person events just because I think, again, a lot of them do have Zoom fatigue. And also you can build a relationship with somebody on a call like this. But if we were doing this podcast in person in a room, it would be quite a different dynamic. So yeah, I think pros and cons. In terms of hybrid working arrangements, yeah, I personally am a strong believer in flexibility and also the ability to offer hybrid arrangements. I mean, if you're as a boss, and again, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but if you're a boss and you're asking your team to come in 5 days a week into the office, that was the old pre 2020 approach. And the way that I think all of us who worked in offices before pre 2020, we would have said,
Yeah.
I used to go to the office every day. Like, the new joiners to the workforce, what are you guys complaining about? Like, that was how it was always done. But now it's
Yeah.
so different. Like, when somebody's recruiting someone now, one of the first questions they get asked is, hey, do you have a hybrid working policy, or what is your, flexible working arrangements here? And you have to have something. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of good talent because it's kind of become like a mandatory requirement. So yeah, I think it's a tough one. People always prefer in person, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like the takeaway for me there, what you did so well is just really tie back the purpose and the outcome and what people are looking for from like the in-person connection. So if anything, it's really asking people to think about whenever you're thinking about whatever modality you're going to do something. So if it is about, right, we want to get people into the office, then if people want connection, free food, and some good networking, then you need to create a space now that actually allows for that in order to entice more people back when there are options to work remotely or do things in a more in another way. And so
Yeah,
that probably that's kind of a link that I can see from for community and community building where you're doing it in order to really satisfy those base like human requirements, whether it's professional or personal, it's there as this extra thing to give us support, to give us that sense of connection.
yeah,
And actually you can draw a lot of benefits from that into the workplace, it
for
seems.
sure. And I think, also, I mean, again, not an expert on mental health, but from a mental health perspective, it's super important, at least for me, to be able to actually meet and interact with people. Cause I don't know whether I'm an introvert or extrovert or somewhere in between, because the Myers-Briggs test keeps giving me different results every time I take it. But I like, I'm at home right now. I like working at home, and it gives me a flexibility. My TV is right there. My bed's there. My fridge is there. My dog is here. I'm comfortable, but I can't do this all the time. Like, I would go nuts. I think I do need to go to the office once or twice a week, meet people again who share a common sort of mindset or wavelength to me, so that I can speak to them about the work stuff that I'm sort of doing or want to be doing. So yeah, I think you need a balance. Balance is the key word. And as
Yeah.
somebody once told me, it's work-life balance is the phrase that everybody uses. I think it's very difficult, and balance sort of seems to mean that it should be equal, like, work and life should be equal.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I mean, that's ideally what the world would be like, but I don't think that's how it works. I think what you have to figure out is how to integrate your work and your life together so that you have that balance mentally and, physically, I guess. But yeah, you need both, and you can't just be one or the other, because it just be, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
the right approach for you or for anyone else working with you or around you or your family.
No, I agree. The term that I like the most as an alternative to work-life balance has been work-life
Mhm.
harmony. And that idea, if you think about an orchestra, like different sections and instruments will be coming into their own at different times, but they all work together in harmony. And I think that as a slightly better analogy than rather we should be striving for a 50-50 all the time and define what balance should mean for everyone. But yeah, I really love this idea of bringing the concepts and the principles of community into our work life, actually. I want to hear some of the failures and the pivots and the challenges. Keep it real for us. Give us the tips and traps for people that do listen to this and are like, and maybe are in a new space and want to set something up. And it might start with that WhatsApp group. Share with us some of your more challenging experiences.
Ah, so there's a lot. So I'll try and
Top
maybe
three.
just a
Yeah.
couple. But yeah, I think okay, so where do I even start? So I think in 2017 when this whole thing started, it was a WhatsApp group, right? So it was just meant to be that. It was meant to be informal, nothing, commercial or nothing with sponsorships and summits and all that other stuff. So I think August 2017 is when I started the WhatsApp group. October 2017 is when my dad passed away suddenly. And he was general counsel. He was an in-house lawyer and he had just kind of pseudo retired, even
Mm.
though like he loved his job. So he was retired, but he was still working. But what he wanted to do, he was the GC of Pepsi APAC. And so, he was traveling a lot. And so he sort of stopped that. He was doing a bit of consulting on the side and he wanted to set up his own business in Sydney and it was called Corporate Counsel Advantage. And he had got the website, got the ABN business registration all done. Everything was in place. And the idea behind it, Corporate Counsel Advantage, was to help corporate counsels, in-house lawyers, with all the stuff that you don't learn at law school. So your soft skills, how to draft documents, how to speak, how to negotiate, all that stuff that you need, but you don't get
Mm.
taught really. And then yeah, he passed away, and so then Law Ninja sort of evolved very quickly into trying to do some of what he wanted to do. So I started doing, as you mentioned, a lot of the workshops and the webinars, especially, over, COVID 2020 onwards. And yeah, we did a lot of workshops for law schools, partly because I personally believe, and I think as a community, all of us believe that giving back to the next generation of lawyers, of people in our community is super important. And so all the workshops we've done for those 60 law schools, they're all in developing economies pretty much. So Asia, Africa, Middle East, and on things like, how to write your CV, how to speak, how to negotiate, all those soft skills. And so that's been really fulfilling personally and professionally. But yeah, in terms of failures, it's not a failure, but yeah, that was one of the key driving factors behind Law Ninjas and what it's become. And it still is a driving factor. In terms of failures, yes, many things. I fail even today on things. I get rejected. I've been rejected so many times by sponsors, by people who we want to collaborate with, and it's something I've become quite accustomed to, become quite good at dealing with the rejection. I'm a lawyer with a big ego, and so, when rejection used to come around in my early stages of my career, it wasn't a very good feeling. Now I kind of use it as a fuel. So whenever somebody says to me, "Oh, we don't think this idea is good enough," or "We don't want to do this with you," or "We don't want to co-host this conference with you," I'm like, "Okay, I'll show you." And then usually I use that as a way or an impetus to do something even better or even bigger. So that's been really in that sort of weird sense. Also, when this was a couple of years ago now, I thought, okay, I've got this community now. We've kind of grown to a pretty decent size. Where is it going? Like, what's going to happen with it? You need to monetize it in some way because otherwise it just sort of collapses. And I would love to, I have a full-time job and I do Law Ninjas. And so it's a lot. And plus, I'm trying to also have a family and lead a life outside of this screen right here. And so, I said, okay, I'll set up a website. I'll call it lawninjas.co. And essentially what it'll be a collection, library essentially of all the webinars and all the videos and all the, things we've done, all the materials we've got in one place. People pay a small subscription fee every month. It was, I think, 10 USD. And I said, oh, lawyers are rich, they should be fine. And law students, $10 should be okay. And I was already like, okay, I'm gonna, this is by the end of this year, once the website's launched, I'm gonna just chill, give up all my job, everything, because I'll be living off this, subscription fee income. I'll buy a Tesla. Buy a beach house. Yeah. So that idea failed miserably. Like I think I got maybe 10 paying subscribers. I think it was a combination of a few things. I didn't do any market research. Probably that was the reason why it failed. But I think law students, it's tough. It's tough, especially in developing economies where, our strength lies in our community. There's a lot of free content out there. There's a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of Spotify podcasts. There's everything there. So getting somebody to pay for something, unless you're like a Netflix and you're providing awesome content on a daily basis, it's going to be hard to get somebody to pay. And then I think the lawyers as well, I don't know, it didn't work. So anyway, so that was a massive failure. But again, that helped us focus our energies into the event side of things, the sort of non-virtual side of things. And that's been really good. I think events, they're, very expensive and very time consuming and difficult to host. And like right now, we're planning our first summits in Dubai and Singapore next month, and both places we've never done anything in, and they come with challenges, and each jurisdiction has its own requirements and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's part of the fun, it's part of the challenge. But sorry, there's a lot more, but yeah, for another day.
They're a good selection. I think it's especially when we see organizations that, if you follow you on social, your lawninjas.co platform is, it's a really great platform, really well curated. And you just think these guys are absolutely killing it. And when you see the quality of sponsors that back these summits, which I believe are free to attend. Is that right?
Yeah. So, okay, two things. One is lawninjas.co in its current avatar is very different to what it used to be. So now
so there you go. You've evolved
there's no
from
subscription fee now.
failures.
It's free. It's kind of like a LinkedIn for lawyers. So, it's got a lot of features and things. So anybody who's listening, lawninjas.co, sign up. And then, so the summits, there's a few different approaches I have tried by others. The current model, and that's the one I think we're going to go with at least until I pivot again, is it's free for in-house lawyers. So if you're an in-house lawyer, i.e. a lawyer inside a company like a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi or whatever, it's free. But if you're anything else, i.e. a law firm, legal tech, legal recruitment, legal service provider of any kind, then you can't even buy a ticket. So you have to become a sponsor. And the sponsorship packages, there are many of them and they're quite affordable, right up to, less affordable. So you have to have some skin in the game in order to be able to attend. And that's partly because that was feedback I got from some of my sponsors at the very beginning. So they used to say to me, they're like, Rohan, we just spent a couple of $1,000 or a few $1,000s on sponsoring your event. But our biggest competitor just bought a ticket for a couple of $100s and they were in the same room as us, speaking to the same people as us. It doesn't make any sense. So I then got rid of that ticketing model, even though it's probably less profitable for me now. But, I think you gotta listen to your customers. I think that's something that I've learned the hard way, but I'm still not the best at, but I still want to keep doing because they are the people. And when I say customers, I don't mean just the sponsors. I mean your in-house, your community as well. Because in my head, right? So Law Ninjas has just been me really sort of running things until earlier this year. So for 7 years, I've been kind of doing it by myself. And now only this year, we've managed to bring on a couple of people who are helping us, Fatima and Denise, who are helping us in, growing the brand, growing the community, figuring out strategy, helping with events, all that kind of stuff. And so I think up till now, it's just kind of been me and whatever I think is right. And that's why probably we've had so many failures, because I don't know what's right. So now that we have a couple of more fresh pair of eyes looking at things, now that the community is a lot bigger, I think we're sort of finding our way through. But um, there's a lot of other legal communities out there as well. But I don't really want law ninjas to be like them. Not that they're bad or they're not, good communities. But I think law ninjas, we're trying to do something different. We're trying to, like, you will rarely hear of another legal community doing free workshops for law schools around the world. You will
Yeah.
rarely hear of other communities kind of doing things in the way that we do them. So we do have a secret sauce. I used to work at KFC, so we do have a secret
Oh,
recipe, and it's not rocket science. Like doing an event,
yeah.
building a community, it's not rocket science. It just requires a lot of tenacity, a lot of hard work, and being able to take a lot of rejections as well. I think that's part of the whole experience.
Yeah. And I know it depends on, the type of person you are, but hearing that, I see it personally as a real call to action to say for people that have all these desires and ideas and wishes and maybe have, can picture what a community or what any goal particularly in particular might look like for them, but can stop from and not even begin it because they see all of the obstacles and the hurdles. And I know there are several lawyers that fall into that category sometimes, where we don't even start something because we think it's going to be a failure or there's going to be all these hardships along the way. But hearing you, one, share exactly what some of those were openly, but two, just being able to reflect back the new and improved version that's come from those, I think is just really powerful, because you don't get to where you are without having gone through that. When I know, even personally, you can sort of fall into those traps of comparisons, or, you're scrolling through LinkedIn and everyone else seems to be doing so much better than you, or that they seem to, and it looks so easy when you see it just in front of you in a post or a nice photo montage or video montage. But to really kind of understand what goes behind it can again, it can either drive people in to go, oh, I'm going to give it a go, or it could make people say, do you know what, I'm good at my day job, I'll just join someone else's community. But that for me is just really inspirational, and hearing that you've really managed it single-handedly up until now is a phenomenal effort. But one thing I did want to just pick up on was actually when we talked about, growing these global communities, and I know you've had a really international experience yourself. And so you must bring a certain level of cultural awareness to what you do. But when it comes to when you've grown so much and so fast across the world, as you said, from this little group where it's just you and whatever you think kind of goes, and you can kind of play around with things without too much risk. When it comes to growing this community where you really, have this kind of focus on service and giving back to the legal community, how have you navigated those kind of the cultural nuances that exist amongst your membership? And what are your thoughts on building a community really inclusively in that regard?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm Indian. I Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, I've worked in a few places, and now I live in Australia, and so I'm also an Australian passport holder, but I still support India when it comes to cricket, just for
Cricket,
the
right,
record.
got it.
But I think, cultural differences, yes, there are cultural differences, but they're not as people are not as different as the media makes them out to be, or what you see in the movies, or what you read about, right? I think we all have similar. We all have families. We all have jobs. We all are trying to pay the bills. We're all trying to do something that's fulfilling professionally and personally. We all have to do school drop offs, and there's there's a lot of similarities actually. But in terms of cultural differences, yes, okay, if I was speaking to a GC in India versus a GC in South Africa, this might be some differences in terms of obviously what current legislation looks like in each country and what the current challenge or hot topic is. Yes, but a lot of the things are very similar. Like, for example, a very hot topic within a community such as Law Ninjas is recruitment. A lot of people are trying to find not only maybe the next role, but they're also looking to hire the next candidate. And it's a very difficult process to go through. People have been through all kinds of bad stuff when it comes to recruitment. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of differences, but I think there's more similarities. And so navigating that hasn't been as challenging, I think, as maybe, yes, I would have thought at the beginning of the journey. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really important. And I think doing these events as well, like for example, we did an event in Cape Town earlier this year, which was the African GC Summit. And I had never been to Africa before. And so I kind of said, this is going to be interesting. Given that
Yeah.
I don't know anything unless other than what I've seen on, Netflix or whatever. I don't know anything about Africa really. And so many people flew in from different countries to Cape Town to attend that event. So we had a nice sort of United Nations of countries, of
Yeah.
representatives in the room. And there were so many differences in that room. Like, a person in South Africa is quite different to a person in Egypt, but it's all just Africa, right? Egypt is still Africa. I forget that sometimes. So yes, there are differences, but I think we all came to the same table and we were discussing the same topics and had the same sort of pain points. And so I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so powerful to really take that with us, that there is more that unite us than divide us, and then going in open and willing to learn and sharing those new experiences. Mm.
One thing you said earlier, which I just wanted to just
Yes.
touch on is, when you look at somebody's LinkedIn and you're scrolling through and you're like, oh, wow, they look so successful or they look like they're killing it. Do you know what? I mean, this
Mhm.
is not an original quote, but I think it's is comparison is the thief of joy. I mean, we spend so much time. It's not just LinkedIn, it's Instagram, it's, social media, anything. Even like when we talk to our friends and they're like, oh, I went on a holiday to Paris. And I'm like, I just sat at home all day. There's all those kinds of things where like, oh, I could be happier if I was doing what
Yeah.
that person is doing. A lot of it is not true. I think, I personally have always been, comparing myself to others. I've always
Mhm.
felt, oh, I wish I was doing that. Like, okay, perfect example, right? So I lived overseas for 12 years. I moved away from
Yeah.
Australia. I lived overseas for 12 years. And then I came back during COVID to be closer to my family. During those 12 years, I would look at, my friends back in Sydney, and they all, had just sort of, I guess, settled in Sydney after university. They had, built houses, bought cars, like financially, at least on the face of it, I thought, wow, they're in a really good place. Whereas me, I was living in London, paycheck to paycheck, traveling and blowing up money. And I, it wasn't like I didn't have a house, I didn't buy any cars, I didn't have anything of that. And so I used to look at them going, wow, they're so, financially fortunate. I wish I had what they have. And so for 12 years, I had that belief and I would compare myself. When I came back to Sydney and I was speaking to my friends about it, in fact, one friend of mine, Clement, I was speaking to him and I was like, oh man, you've got so many houses and you've got so many cars and you've got a beautiful family. I've been so sort of not jealous or envious, but just kind of like, oh, wish I had that sort of situation. And he's like, for the last 12 years, I've been looking at you and we've all been looking at you going, we wish we had what you had because you were traveling the world and you were working in these awesome places. So look, nobody is ever going to have everything, but you just got to find a job or a business or something that makes you happy in terms of, and it's not going to, another thing is happiness is I think, a fallacy. I don't think we should be striving for happiness because again, what does that even mean? I think what you need to find is something where you are enjoying what you do and it's obviously ticking the boxes that you need ticked, and you're also then able to give to your family, spend time with your family, because there's no point being the successful rock star of a lawyer but never seeing your family or
Yeah.
all the kinds of things happening, right? So I think you have to not compare yourself to others, and it's a very it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
And also like, please do not look at me or law ninjas and go, oh wow, so successful, we wish we were like them. Trust me, lots of sleepless nights, lots of stress, anxiety, pain. And it's not just a past tense, continuing present and definitely for the future as well. But the reason I do it is because it brings me joy. Like my family looks at me and they go, "You must be crazy for working this hard and doing all this stuff." But they also see how whenever I talk about Law Ninjas, like I have this gleam in my eye and it's my, you know, I was going to say it's my baby, but it's kind of the thing that drives me. And because
Yeah.
of dad, because of me and what I'm trying to build the community into, I think you have to find something that drives you, and that's when the real essence of life comes out, I think.
Oh, there's so much that I resonate with what you shared as someone who feels like the nomad at the moment, who's been living overseas and yeah, and going back, home, whether it's to the UK or Australia, I've lived and everyone's super settled. And I've also seen that's flip both ways. And sometimes I think we all need to you need to really redefine or define what wealth means to you, because it's not just about dollars in the bank. And there is so much more that contribute to our wealth and that sense of autonomy and freedom and are some of those things. And I feel like throughout this conversation, I've just heard how purpose driven you are in what you do. And I suspect that in and of itself generates that energy to keep going through all of those things and all of those challenges. So to close us out, as you know, this podcast is called Unbiased, and I've
Mhm.
been sort of working through these conversation starters and ways to move us from judgment to curiosity. And as part of that, I really believe that we should have more questions than answers. And so, can you, Rohan, leave us today with a question that you think more of us should be asking more of the time?
Yeah. I think regardless of what stage of our careers we're at or our lives we're at, I think we should ask ourselves, hey, why am I doing what I'm doing and what am I doing it for? So what I mean by that is, okay, a lot of us, especially lawyers, right? A lot of us kind of fell into the law because maybe we got good grades in high school and we were like, "Ooh, I have either being a doctor or being a lawyer as my two options. I don't like blood, so I'll be a lawyer." Or we were told as kids, "Oh, you argue really well. You should become a lawyer one day." All those kind. Oh yeah, like your dad was a lawyer in my situation, or even my mom and dad were lawyers. So there we go.
Okay,
Um,
done
so
deal.
they tried to talk me out of it, but I still went ahead. And so I think, yeah, sometimes we fall into our lives and fall into our careers and we then get stuck and we keep doing it because it obviously is paying the bills and we don't want to change careers now at this late stage because, oh my God, I'm going to have to start all over again. If it makes you feel any better, my dad quit so he was GC for Pepsi India in the year 2000, a long time ago. And mom said, okay, we want to move to Australia now because it was me, I was 14 years old. And my brother, he was 3 years old at the time. And so they said, okay, for our two sons, we want to move to Australia to give them opportunities and, all the things that come along with living in Australia. And so everybody around them said, "You're crazy. Why would you do that? You're giving up, a house and a car and a driver and a chauffeur and a gardener and all the things that come in India with a good corporate job."
Mm.
And so he literally resigned from his role in India and came to Australia with us. We had nothing in terms of, he didn't have a job. He didn't have any security. We didn't really know anyone. We knew like one family friend at one family in Sydney. That was it. And we had never been to Australia before. Dad had been for like 3-day trip and he's like, "Oh, this is nice. Let's
Right.
immigrate here." But we had never been here. And in my head, I was like, am I going to have kangaroos as backyard pets? Like what's going to happen here? And so I think, yeah, if it makes you feel better, like if you're worrying about, "Oh, I don't want to change career paths or I don't want to take a risk," it's never too late to take a risk. Okay. I think dad did it and he had to give up everything and he worked, pretty like low paying legal jobs in Australia for a few years. And then obviously then Pepsi gave him an opportunity to be APAC GC and kind of worked out in the
Mhm.
end in that sense. But even for me, like in 2017, which is when Law Ninja started, I was at a law firm, good salary, good everything, arguably on partnership track. And then I said, no, I want to be in-house. I've seen what dad did at Pepsi. I kind of like that world. I want to move in-house to KFC. The opportunity came up. It was a 40% pay cut to go to that other role. Not that KFC was paying badly. It was just that law firms pay so well that
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard. And that's why a
It's
lot of
hard.
us, I think, get stuck in that law firm life as well, even though we may or may not like it, is because when we look elsewhere, we're like, oh, I'll have to take a pay cut. I don't want to take a pay cut because, either our ego or our bank balance or our families, we've got, expensive school fees to pay and all that kind of stuff, responsibilities, golden handcuffs or whatever you want to call it. And so, we get stuck. I took that 40% pay cut, and I think everybody around me, including my family, thought I was nuts for doing it. But I, for some reason, had this thing. I was like, no, I think this is going to be a good opportunity in itself and also a good stepping stone to other things. And so if I hadn't taken that massive pay cut, I wouldn't have started Law Ninjas. I wouldn't be where I am today. I'd probably still be at a law firm. And I'm not saying law firms are bad places. They're great places. But I personally would not have been as, and I don't want to use the word happy, but I would not have been as fulfilled professionally as
Yeah.
I am today. So I think take a risk, take a step back, think about what it is that you want out of your career, out of your life, because life is short. Like, honestly, it is very, very short. And so you don't want to 5, 10, 20 years from now, look back and go, oh, I could have started that business, or I could have moved in-house, or I could have set up, I don't know, something which would have made me, happier, or actually I would have been using my skills or my, interests in a much more effective way. I think that's really important. So take a step back, think about what it is that you're doing, what is that you want, where you want to see yourself, and try it. I mean, look, if you're a lawyer and you want to try something new, you can always try that new thing, either as a side hustle while you're doing your law job. I know it's tough, but look, you got to do it if you want to do it. So do it as a side hustle. See, firstly, because sometimes the side hustle may actually be a terrible idea, right? It may not work. It may not be revenue generating. It may not be the right idea. It may, not work at all for you or for your customers or whatever. Try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least you know in your head that you tried it out before you obviously quit everything and then move to the side hustle. But I think
Yeah.
it's important to at least give it a go, because you don't want to say what if. I think the
Yeah.
things in life that we regret the most are not the things we did, but the things we didn't do. And I have so many regrets in life all of my regrets are actually things I didn't do rather than things I did. The things I did, yes, okay, some of them I regret, but actually I can see now that they either directed me into another direction, which was better, or they taught me something that now I hold, and it's part of my personality. It's part of my, psyche and my being, and it makes me a better person. I've been through some really bad stuff in the last few years, personally and professionally, and I am now a much better person, I think, and a much
Yeah.
better son, brother, husband, father than I used to be. And so I think you can't buy that. You can't learn that unless you go through bad stuff. So
It's such a call to action and questions to really reflect and do so more often on all of us. Am I happy with what I'm doing? What could be different? And take action on the responses to those questions. Thank you so much, Rohan, for your time and your wisdom. I hope to be part of one of these summits one day. I know that there's one coming up in Singapore, and I just happen to ironically be in Australia, but I will follow you around the world and meet you there somewhere. Thanks again.
thanks so much, Darshi.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I derive so much energy from speaking to such inspiring guests and having really meaningful and challenging conversations. If you felt the same way, my ask of you is to please subscribe to this podcast, either here or wherever you download your podcast content from. Unbiased is a labour of love for me, and the impact that these perspectives have depend on reaching as many eyes and ears as possible. So your support is invaluable. Until next time, stay curious.